It's all quiet in the underground bunker. Doors closed, locks bolted. But the Great One isn't just resting on his laurels. He's making sure your weekend is even better by giving you his best. This is the best of Mark Levin.
I want to thank all the folks that have been filling in here and there. I think we finally have this resolved, at least for a while. Today will be the first day in which we try and do our full 3 hours, and against doctor's orders, but we do what we have to do here, don't we? We Philadelphia boys, we're tough. We can't just surrender, you know. We don't just give up. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I'm watching what's going on in Israel today. We've all been watching what's been going on for a long time now. Actually, before October 7th, with Iran and Hamas, Hezbollah. We talk here about forever wars, and we talk about that rightly. In other words, at some point a war needs to come to an end. Except apparently when it comes to the Jews in Israel. Now, I am stunned by the American media. I am disgusted by the American media. Now, the reason is because there's not a dime's worth of difference between the American media and the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party fills the American media, and the American media fills the Democrat Party, their staff on Capitol Hill, their staff in the White House, and so forth. They're one and the same. Particularly MSNBC and CNN. But ABC, George Stephanopoulos, the rest of them, Israel's not allowed to win. Israel's not allowed to fight back. Israel's not allowed to destroy their enemies. Israel's not even allowed to try to destroy their enemies. A totally different standard is applied to the state of Israel and to the Jews there than any other country on the face of the earth, including ours. And this administration lit the fire, the forest fire that is still burning in the Middle East. And they keep telling Israel, we have a solution for you. Surrender. The way we did in Afghanistan. Surrender. Not only surrender, but the people who raped and pillaged and murdered your people, give them a country right on your border. Give them Judea and Samaria. Give them your ancient homeland. Oh, yes, and don't worry, we'll protect you. The same Harris-Biden administration that hasn't lifted a finger to stop Iran, but instead has been the bankers for Iran, has been the oil the oil commodity salesman for Iran. That has breathed life into that horrific regime where the people of Iran would like to overthrow it. By the way, Mr. Producer in America, is this too hard-hitting today? Should I do slapstick? I'm just curious. Should I do slapstick Philadelphia? Is that what I should do? We want it a little lighter, a little happier. Well, this is the nature of the world, and this is conservative talk radio. And this is what we do on conservative talk radio. We talk about things that matter in everybody's life. This matters in everybody's life. This is crucially important because World War III is about to break open. And that's thanks to the appeasers, to the sellouts in the Harris-Biden administration. How is it possible that we have a vice president of the United States, a sitting vice president of the United States, who hasn't been asked a single damn question about what's going on right now with Israel and Hezbollah? Not one question. How is that possible? And she wants a promotion to be commander-in-chief, president of the United States. How is that possible? And then we have the Democrat flunkies, the reprobates. They're all out there telling us, well, we don't need to know where she stands, so we kind of know where she stands. We don't need Democrat surrogates, mouthpieces, grifters, operatives telling us what we, the people, need to know and what we, the people, need to hear. But it's already starting. The death toll in Lebanon. I think I just heard 400, 450 dead, several thousand wounded. How many of those are terrorists? We have no idea. So we're going to get the same propaganda. Now, let me tell you a little story. Just a sort of a endnotes history about Lebanon. Lebanon was a beautiful, beautiful country on the Mediterranean. A thriving country. where Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived side by side. It was a little paradise in the Middle East. It truly was. Where people got along, there was commerce, there was a very lucrative resort and travel business there, people invested there, and then one day, guess what happened? The president of Lebanon, who happened to be Christian, was assassinated. He was democratically elected. Well, who assassinated him? Iran, through Hezbollah. The terrorists assassinated him. They toppled the government. Now, they still have a representative government there, a democracy, in Beirut, Lebanon. But Hezbollah, in the end, calls the shots. Why? Because Hezbollah is more powerful than the Lebanese army. There was a civil war in Lebanon, and Hezbollah won. So they toppled a beautiful country with beautiful people. They toppled. They assassinated the president. And many people escaped. Many people in our country today are Lebanese. Some are Muslims and Christians and Jews. Some of them are in Europe. They escaped with their lives. That's what's going on in Lebanon today. The people of Lebanon, like the people of Iran, like the people of Yemen, they don't want war. They don't want Iran. They don't want the Houthis. They don't want Hezbollah, but they've got them. And so when people keep talking about, why don't the Israelis stand down and so forth and so on, what are we talking about? These are terrorist organizations, terrorist states that have killed Americans, that have come here and blown up our towers, taken out our airliners, that are trying to assassinate, as I speak, Donald Trump. You know, I wish I could be much more light about this, Mr. Producer, and do a tap dance and cut jokes. I just can't do that. Do you know what I mean? It just doesn't work. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, here's the problem. As you know, on October 7th, Israel was attacked. Their people were slaughtered, raped, butchered. On October 8th, Hezbollah started firing their missiles, their more sophisticated missiles, into Israel. Israel has had to swallow 9,000 missiles from Hezbollah since October 8th. But Israel was focused in large part on dealing with Hamas because they wanted to get their hostages out, among other things. 9,000 missiles fired into a sovereign democratic nation, our ally. And Israel has had enough. Hamas is on the run. They have a plan for finally squeezing them out of existence. And so they've decided that Hamas, which has 100,000 men under arms, that is a massive military, and they have 150,000 sophisticated missiles, that has been somewhat reduced as a result of what Israel has been doing and is going to do. And Israel has said enough. Now, here's my problem. None of this would be going on but for the Harris-Biden administration. None of it. And what has the Harris-Biden administration done to Iran as a result of what Iran is doing to the state of Israel? Nothing. Nothing. Well, what do you want them to do? Well, what did Reagan do? He took out their entire oil infrastructure, and that stopped them. Well, what would Trump do? What did Trump do? He took out Soleimani, and he warned them, you do anything else, we're going to take out more. And that stopped them. What has Biden done? What has Harris done? Nothing. In fact, the more Iran does and the more its surrogates do, the more the terrorists do to the Jews in the Middle East, the more Biden and Harris put pressure on Netanyahu. And they've tried to topple the Netanyahu government. I want to play something for you. This was played a few years back in the last election, Trump versus Biden, but I want to play something for you because I know we have a large Jewish audience. Obviously, the vast majority of the audience isn't Jewish, but we have a large Jewish audience in New York and in Philadelphia, in L.A., and other places. And I want you to listen to this, and I want you to ask yourselves, after you listen to this, what exactly has Kamala Harris done to support and defend Israel? Please take your Democrat hats off. What has she said in the last 72 hours? Not a damn thing. Israel's fighting for its survival. Its survival. She has said nothing, not a word. Because she wants the vote of the river to the sea crowd. Dearbornistan. She's thrown in. She's thrown in with the wrong side. That's why. I want you to listen to this. This is a piece that was done, as I said, a few years ago. Go ahead.
Brooklyn, across the river. The city of friendly people, sometimes called Dodgerville.
In 1955, Holocaust survivors looking to begin their new lives were arriving by the hundreds in Brooklyn. They quickly outgrew their synagogue that was run from a garage, prompting their rabbi to meet with the building's owner, Fred Trump. Today, the Beach Haven Jewish Center stands strong on a plot of land given to the Jewish community for $10 by Mr. Trump. Fred Trump made it his priority to help construct the solid brick synagogue to provide a lifelong place of worship to survivors arriving from Poland, Germany, and Austria. And their families still worship there today, passing by a simple plaque on the wall that reads, Fred Trump, Humanitarian. 62 years later, Donald Trump followed in his father's footsteps to erect another building, the United States Embassy in Jerusalem. Israel has no better friend than President Trump. On November 3rd, vote to honor the loving legacy his father gave to the Jewish people. Vote for Donald J. Trump for president. American Liberty Fund is responsible for the content of this advertisement.
I believe the election is the 5th, but, in several states, Pennsylvania and others, early voting has already started, or is starting. So now the question arises. The use of pagers and walkie-talkies. Oh my goodness. What has Israel done here? An act of terrorism, says a former Democrat, Secretary of Defense, CIA official, Chief of Staff. Terrorism? Oh yes, they used pagers and walkie-talkies to either kill or injure 3,000 Hezbollah fighters, if not leadership. Which, by the way, was absolute genius. Absolute genius as they're laying the foundation for trying to start the beginning of the end of what's been going on against the state of Israel. So now Israel is attacked when it uses guided bombs. Israel is attacked when it uses its IDF foot soldiers. Israel is attacked when it uses pagers and walkie-talkies. Israel is attacked by the American media, a.k.a. the Democrat Party, a.k.a. Harris, a.k.a. Biden, for trying to survive, for God's sakes. For trying to survive.
Mark Levin.
Making your weekend even better. This is the best of Mark Levin.
I listened very carefully to President Trump's speech today. First of all, it was fantastic. His substance on the economy and on the border. He has a charisma. He's got a jocularity that is really just terrific. And of course, he's spot on. And I was making a list of his economic policies, many of which we already know because he's been talking about it for some time, unlike Harris. And I want to be honest with you, America, it reminds me of Ronald Reagan's tax cuts. We had the greatest economic growth since the Industrial Revolution under Reagan, and since Reagan, the greatest economic growth under Donald Trump. What Trump is proposing is not radical, despite what the media say today, and I want you to understand that the media used to call the Reagan economic program, Reaganomics. Remember all that? Some of you do, some of you don't. And we had an explosion of economic growth. The economy literally grew over an 8-year period. The economy, the American economy, over 30%. Over 30%. We'd never seen so much prosperity. And but for the pandemic, the same with Trump. And when we were coming out of the pandemic, we saw an explosion of growth, low inflation, 1.4%. Imagine that. And then the Democrats step in with trillions of dollars in spending. So let's discuss this rationally with a little bit of historical context. Number one, the Democrats will never cut spending. The only spending they cut is when it comes to the United States military and Veterans Affairs. Also when it comes to the border. Otherwise, they will not cut spending. Massive redistribution of wealth. Massive, phony, radical left-wing programs that enrich their oligarchs and enrich their left-wing organizations. And so you have this Green New Deal, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, trillions of dollars, hundreds of billions, we don't even know where they went, over $40 billion to hook up the internet all over the country, including people who don't have it. So far, they've hooked up nobody. $7 to $8 billion for electric vehicle charging stations, of which they built 8. They're never going to stop spending, and I'll tell you why. Unfortunately, it's now built into the system since Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal. That is, the Senate Democrats are never going to go along with cutting spending, except in those areas I already mentioned. And so you need 60 votes. You need 60 votes to pass a budget if they choose to filibuster it. You get budgets that come out of the House of Representatives where they're cutting spending, and then Schumer blocks them. And so there's not a lot we can do about it. And so when I hear these economists, many of our friends on Fox, on other networks and so forth, say, well, the Republicans and the Democrats, none of them want to cut spending, that's simply a lie. We have House Republicans who are constantly trying to cut spending, some more than others. And it is killed in the United States Senate by the Democrats. And by the way, it only takes 40-some-odd Democrats to kill it. And they have a simple majority right now that kills it. So they're not going to cut spending. And this, by the way, is going to one day crash our economy. But that's not the point I want to address. Trump is talking about slashing the capital gains tax. Ronald Reagan did that. Trump is talking about slashing taxes across the board, including the top level, middle, and lower. Ronald Reagan did that too. Trump is talking about companies in America who invest in heavy equipment because it's very expensive, that they'll be able to amortize it within 1 year. Reagan did the same thing. These are very, very important policies that will build up our industries, that will build up manufacturing, that will strengthen our industrial base, that will strengthen our economy, and create tremendous, well-paying American jobs right here. That is what Trump is doing. This pinprick stuff that Kamala Harris talks about, well, if this company does this, if this company does that, it never works, and they don't do it anyway. She's talking about a massive increase in the capital gains tax. You know what's going to happen if there's a massive increase in the capital gains tax? Companies are going overseas. They're either going to move their headquarters overseas, but they're certainly going to move their manufacturing overseas. So think about that. Under Kamala Harris economy, more jobs are moved overseas and more illegal aliens come into the country and take jobs that exist. This is crazy. This is crazy. So when you have open borders, when you're not deporting anybody, when you're flying into the country 1 million illegal aliens, and by flying them into the country, certifying them as legal aliens on a pathway to citizenship, that's what they're doing. It is so diabolical. Undermining American workers, undermining American wages. You're destroying the ability to assimilate cultures and other populations of diverse backgrounds all over the world into our own culture. That's what's going on in Springfield, Ohio, despite all the lies and from the left and all the propaganda. That's what's going on in every city in America. That's what's going on in Chicago. And by the way, in hour 3, we're going to have our man Lee Zeldin on the program to talk about what's happening with Venezuelan gangs in New York. And it's not just New York, it's Chicago too. Chicago has a massive gang problem. Domestic gangs now facing off against Venezuelan gangs, for God's sakes. We didn't have this problem 4 years ago. We didn't have it in Chicago. We didn't have it in New York. We didn't have it in Philadelphia or L.A., and we have it now. And now she's going to take a trip to the border, and we're all supposed to get excited because she might burp up a couple of rehearsed phrases? Come on, America. Either we save our country or it's not going to be saved. Now, what about tariffs? Trump is not a tariff king. He doesn't put tariffs on everything. Ronald Reagan was more free market than not. And he used to boast about this. I remember I worked in his campaigns and I served in his administration for 8 years. But Reagan put tariffs on goods, electronics, coming from Japan. They were destroying our television industry, and they pretty much wound up doing that, our electronics industry and so forth. There had been negotiations and negotiations, but they wouldn't budge. So he placed the most onerous tariffs imaginable on many of these Japanese electronic products to try and save our electronics industry. Trump is saying the same thing, that the communist Chinese are destroying our farmlands. We now literally have a negative balance of trade when it comes to farm products. We've never had a negative balance of trade when it's come to farm products. And so what Trump is saying is we got to save our agricultural communities. What's Biden doing? Nothing. Zero. Busy subsidizing illegal aliens. Trump is a common sense guy. He's more conservative than most Republicans who've served in the Oval Office. He's telling the industries that are building auto plants south of the border, you don't get to build auto plants in Mexico and then ship them 20 miles into Texas, into Arizona, into New Mexico, and so forth, ripping us off like this, destroying American workforce, American industry by playing a game, by playing a system. You don't get to do that. And so he says, no. What has Biden and Harris done about it? Nothing. Zero. This electric vehicle stuff on top of the open borders, on top of taxes that will send American business and jobs overseas, on top of illegal aliens taking American jobs that exist in this country and driving down wages. This isn't a market system. This is a government run amok. A government industrial policy that Biden and Harris are running, that the Democrats are running, that are destroying our industrial center, our manufacturing, blue-collar jobs and white-collar jobs, now and in the future. And with their spending, with inflation that's going to continue to go through the roof, there are respites, of course, with interest rates and inflation, because monetary policy set by the Fed, they jump in, okay, we're going to cut half a point. Okay, so there's a sudden decrease in interest rates. That's not going to last. It can't last. You can't have $36 trillion on record debt, off record debt when you include entitlement programs of $300 trillion in an economy that creates approximately $17.5 to $18 trillion in wealth every year. It's unsustainable. But you don't kill the golden goose that lays the golden eggs either. You've got to grow. You've got to create prosperity. The American people need to live. They need to survive. And despite all this spending, I know this is a lot to digest, but 3 hours is all I have. They're slashing the military budget. Do you know Kamala Harris has not voted as a senator once for the military budget? Do you know she never voted for an increase in the salaries of any military personnel? Are you aware of this? I don't know why the Trump campaign or the RNC or somebody's not talking about it, so I'll talk about it. I am telling you that Kamala Harris never voted for a salary increase for a single man or woman in uniform, in any uniform in our military services. Not once. Voted against it every single time. But she voted for more money for the bureaucracy. She voted for more money for illegal immigrants. She voted for more money, you name it. She voted money, 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 money. Comes to the military? No. Ladies and gentlemen, these are not our values. This is not our belief system. They are literally destroying our finances, gutting our economy, opening our borders to change the entire nature of the country. This is what they're doing. Now, one other thing. I know it's a lot. It's okay. We got a lot to do today. She's going to go to the border. They say, oh, how exciting. Who gives a crap? She finally comes out of the closet. Oh, there's Kamala. As I've been saying now for months, she's playing rope-a-dope. Oh, and she'll say something that doesn't mean anything. It'll either be a flat-out lie or puffery. Listen, they keep talking about this phony bipartisan bill. I want you to listen to me carefully. I reposted this. It's very important. Very, very important. Kamala Harris says she would sign the so-called bipartisan immigration bill. It's good to know. It's good to know. Here are 6 reasons, just 6 that I came up with out of 300 and some pages in this bill. The bill, number 1, was never bipartisan. It was negotiated in secret, and upon its release was immediately rejected by the overwhelming majority of Republican senators once they read it. Not a single House Republican supported it. So how is this bipartisan? Number 2, the bill would make catch and release. You catch somebody in the United States, they manage to get here, and you release them into the United States. The law of the land, part of our federal immigration code, making stay in Mexico, which Trump wants to put back in place, impossible. Because you would have to undo the statute. And what did I just say? The Senate Democrats would never allow that, and they don't need a majority to stop it. So catch and release would be federalized as a part of federal law. Stay in Mexico would become impossible. That's number 2. Number 3, the bill would require work permits for illegal aliens. Work permits for illegal aliens? They're supposed to be deported. No. They would get work permits as a matter of federal law. Number 4, the bill would require the provision of taxpayer-funded lawyers for illegal aliens. 20 million illegal aliens, every one of them would have a right to a taxpayer-funded lawyer to gum up the works and make enforcing the border and deportation impossible. That's in the so-called bipartisan bill. Up to 5,000 illegal aliens a day would be permitted. That's almost 2 million illegal aliens a year, not even including the gotaways. And the bill would require payment of billions of dollars to sanctuary cities and pro-illegal alien non-governmental organizations. What do you think, folks? She said she would sign that bill on day 1. That's the phony bipartisan bill.
Mark Levin. You're listening to the best of Mark Levin.
Yes, Kamala Harris is rope-a-doping. I think I've been saying that for 2 months now, both on this platform and on Blaze and certainly on Fox. It sure looks like this administration is colluding with Iran. Lawmaker calls for probe into State Department following Robert Malley revelations. Folks, listen to this. How is it that an American administration has provided tens of billions of dollars to an Iranian regime which slaughters its own people, brutalizes its own women, murders gay people, or anybody who disagrees with it, that is building nuclear weapons, that is spending tens of millions of dollars to eviscerate the Jewish people in the Middle East, that is trying to take over the Middle East, whether it's Yemen, Lebanon, Iraq, you name it. Now they're trying to topple the king of Jordan. What gives? Well, we know that Blinken been a boyhood friend with a guy by the name of Robert Malley. We know that Blinken's father was very close to George Soros. George Soros is behind so much, isn't he? Behind so much. In fact, his father and mother ran a foundation that Soros chaired and funded in Hungary. Many of you may not have known that, but it's true. But what do you make of this, folks? And so, let me see if I can pull this back up. Of course not. Well, here's the bottom line. This guy Malley has been under investigation by federal law enforcement for passing information that he obviously wasn't supposed to pass to the Iranian regime. He also had members of his staff who were accused of passing information to the foreign minister of the Iranian regime. And it appears, as best as we can tell, it also appears that the Biden hierarchy covered this up from Congress as long as they possibly could. And it's Representative Banks, Jim Banks, a good man running for governor of Indiana now. He's the one that's saying, it sure looks like collusion to me. Well, it looks like it to me too, Mr. Banks. In fact, it looks worse than collusion to me. This looks like treason. The Iranians have attacked American ships. The Iranians have attacked American military personnel. We've done virtually nothing in response. Why? Why is it that we're supposed to hate Netanyahu and not the Iranian regime? Why? What's going on there, too? Vice President, here, let me read this to you. 1 second. I think I got it finally. Well, I guess not. It doesn't really matter. All right, thanks. But the whole system's frozen, so I'll just do it. I can do it myself. I don't even need the article. Robert Malley was the envoy chosen by Blinken and appointed, therefore, by Biden to negotiate the nuclear deal when Biden came in and Harris came in with the Iranians. And what they basically did is bought them time. Bought them time to build their nuclear weapon. Even the United Nations is banging the pots and pans and saying, look, guys, they're literally weeks away from having 3 nuclear weapons. Our administration has done nothing about it except fund it. Our administration has done nothing about it except withhold arms from Israel. Our administration has done nothing about it but withhold 2,000-pound bombs from Israel. They say, because we don't want them using them on Gaza. That's not why they need 2,000-pound bombs. They need 2,000-pound bombs to take out their nuclear site in Iran. Do you want to know why Iran has not attacked Israel right now, even though Hezbollah, a terrorist organization that killed hundreds of American Marines, remember them, and embassy personnel? Yeah, them. Because Iran knows that Israel will use the opportunity to attack their nuclear weapon site. That's why. They know the United States will not. 30% of our Navy is in the Middle East, in and around the Middle East. We've got jet fighters of every kind. We've got armaments of every kind. We've got a nuclear sub there. We've got 2 carrier groups there. It's just unbelievable what we have, and they've done nothing. Iran, via the Houthis, are blocking the Red Sea. So we can't get our ships through there, and nobody else can. And now Israel, little Israel, all on its own, 6 million Jews, is fighting Hezbollah. They've been fighting Hamas. They're fighting now. Iraq is shooting missiles. The Houthis are shooting missiles. And we blame Netanyahu. They're shooting missiles into Israel, and Israel's supposed to just stand for it. So what is going on here, ladies and gentlemen, that we would not only appease the Iranians, fund them, lift restrictions on them for the selling of oil and so forth, but we would literally collude with them. That we would have leakers at the highest levels of the Harris-Biden administration. Worse than the Alger Hiss case, because of the number of them and the significance of it. What is going on here with this administration and the Iranians threatening to and trying to assassinate Donald Trump, Pompeo, Bolton, O'Neill, others, we're told? This is not normal. This is not normal for the United States. This is not normal for any country to respond by providing billions of dollars to a regime that conducts itself this way. And so it is my view, strongly, that should Donald Trump get elected president, God willing, and should the Republicans hold the House and take the Senate, now these don't have to happen simultaneously, that there are massive investigations. Let's start on the criminal side. There needs to be a massive criminal investigation, and I mean this, of the Department of State, of the National Security Council, of that whole apparatus, to include top political officials appointed by this administration. I'm not saying they're necessarily defendants. I said there needs to be an investigation. Emails need to be looked at, text messages, phone messages, all documents, all electronics. Because I think what's happening here is the greatest sabotage of America and American foreign policy in American history. And I think it's taking place from within. It's no damn conspiracy. You explain this to me. You explain it to me if I'm wrong. And if the Republicans control the House and the Senate, they ought to have a joint congressional hearing, staffed up with staffers who know what they're doing, with national security backgrounds, with investigative backgrounds, brought in specially like they were for, say, Watergate or Iran-Contra or whatever it is, to have a full government-wide investigation of what exactly occurred here. The Middle East is on fire. The Jews are fighting for their survival. All the attacks from this administration are on the elected Israeli government and on Netanyahu, who they sought to topple, for God's sakes. I can assure you, if Kamala Harris is elected president, this will not only continue, it'll be worse. Because the Harris-Biden, Biden-Harris, Blinken-Sullivan, that entire regime is pro-Iran. Pro-Iran. And anti-Israel. You have 30% of our Navy sitting there, not even helping our ally while our ally's under attack. There has to be an explanation for this. And it can't be good. They used to call this treason.
Mark Levin. The Great One makes your weekend even better. This is the best of Mark Levin.
Welcome, America. The other day I was talking about Iran's assassination attempts on Donald Trump, among others. But they're focused like a laser in Donald Trump. They've attempted it. They're going to continue to attempt it. Donald Trump and his staff were briefed on exactly what's going on by intelligence entities in our own country. And as I pointed out, that is an act of war. That is an act of war when another country is attempt to assassinate a former president who's now running for president again. That is an act of war, ladies and gentlemen. Does it sound like and seem like the Biden-Harris administration, does it sound like and seem like they view this as an act of war when they transfer hundreds of billions of dollars to Iran? When they enable Iran to build up its war machine? When they enable Iran to build a nuclear weapon, for God's sakes? When they enable Iran to support the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah against the state of Israel? Shouldn't we be helping the state of Israel? After all, they just knocked off 2 top Hezbollah murderers who killed hundreds of our Marines. Biden and Harris didn't do that. Netanyahu did that. They should be getting a thank you letter. In the meantime, Tom Cotton and Mitch McConnell have sent a public letter out going through, again, these critical military needs that the Biden-Harris administration are withholding from Israel, even mine finders. They buy these tractors, they militarize them so they can clear the fields, clear the roads of IEDs and other types of mines and so forth. Do you know our government is withholding them? Ladies and gentlemen, if you believe in supporting our ally, if you believe in fighting these terrorists, if you're concerned that they're coming to our country, and they're here. They attacked us on 9/11. If you're concerned about this, then you better damn well make sure in Pennsylvania and elsewhere that you are voting, and you are voting early. Meanwhile, they want to assassinate Donald Trump. So I posted the other day, as we talked about, that this is an act of war. And what should happen? What should happen? Well, what is Netanyahu doing? What should we do? We should decapitate Iran. The Islamo-Nazi who runs Iran should be taken out. Well, Mark, that'll be war. Folks, what the hell do you think's going on? They're trying to assassinate Donald Trump. The way you stop the Iranians is by stopping the Iranians. Reagan showed us how to do it. Trump showed us how to do it. Biden has unleashed terrorism in the Middle East against the Jews, against the Christians, against other Muslims, and against we, the American people. That's what they've done. Now, Donald Trump was in Mint Hill, North Carolina today, and he made a statement that I think is reflective of what I posted, as a matter of fact, and it's very, very important. The Iranians do not want Donald Trump as president. Why? Because he'll put an end to this. That's why. He'll put an end to it. He did before, and he'll do it again. And the Iranian people hate that government, too. 3/4 of them don't even support the government. And when they rose up during the Obama administration, Obama turned his back on them. And when they rose up during the Harris-Biden administration, again, they turned their back on them, too. They turned their back on them, too. No wonder you had scores of failed, long in the tooth, buffoonish bureaucrats in our national security culture sign a letter backing Kamala Harris for president. What a bunch of clowns. These are the people who are defunding the United States military. These are the people who are allowing other countries to become superpowers while we're lagging behind. Did you know, by the way, that Kamala Harris never voted for a single defense budget when she was a senator, Mr. Producer? Did you know that? I'm trying to remember. Have I mentioned that before? Well, I want to reiterate it, and I want to underscore she never supported a single pay increase for any of our heroes in military uniform. She voted against every single one of them. Meanwhile, she'll vote for trillions of dollars for New Green Deal, for left-wing organizations, for front groups, for everything else. But our military, she hates our military. She's a fraud and a phony and a fool. But here's Donald Trump in North Carolina today. Cut 16, go.
But if I were the president, I would inform the threatening country, in this case Iran, that if you do anything to harm this person, we are going to blow your largest cities and the country itself to smithereens. We're going to blow it to smithereens. Amen. You can't do that. And there would be no more threats. There would be no more threats. But right now we don't have that leadership or the necessary people, the necessary leaders. We have two people, not one. We don't even know who our president is right now. Who is our president right now? We really don't know.
Joe Biden.
We have two people, not one, that only keep looking. And when you do that, when you just look, trouble always ensues. So it's big trouble for our country. Meanwhile, we have the president of Iran in our country this week. We have large security forces guarding him, and yet they're threatening our former president and the leading candidate to become the next president of the United States. certainly a strange set of circumstances.
And I pointed this out to you yesterday and posted it too. What the hell is going on here? Why are we giving visas to any of these Islamo-Nazi, Iranian regime, genocidal maniacs to come into the United States to go to the UN? Tell me, would Franklin Roosevelt have given visas to any part of the Third Reich or Imperial Japan to come into the United States for any reason? The hell's going on here? More. Cut 17. Go.
As you know, there have been 2 assassination attempts on my life that we know of, and they may or may not involve, but possibly do, Iran. But I don't really know, can't be sure, because in the first case in Butler, Pennsylvania, great place, and we're going back to Butler, by the way. We're going to go back and finish our speech. The FBI has been unable to open the 3 potentially foreign-based apps. And in the second case, the assassin had 6 cell phones in his car, yet the FBI has likewise been unable to penetrate their guard. Shouldn't be tough to do. They want to know, and I want to know, and the whole country and maybe the world wants to know, who is he calling? Who is he calling? In the old days, the FBI and the DOJ used to capture people before anything happened. In current days, the upper echelon of the FBI is all talk while they focus on the sitting president's political opponents. That's what they're doing. They spend so much time. We won the case in Florida. It's all a big scam. It's all against a political opponent, me, who's doing better in the polls than anybody else and should be hopefully able to recapture the presidency in 41 days and make our country great again. But all they focus on is their political opponent. But they must get Apple to open these foreign apps, and they must get Apple to likewise open the...
Does anybody deny that if it wasn't Trump who was the target, let's say it was Obama, God forbid, that these would have been opened long ago, Mr. Producer? If it was Biden, if it was Harris. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I really am not. And I'm not one now either. But this Keystone Cop stuff, you can only take so much of this. At every turn, the wrong thing is done. At every turn, there's a block to getting information. Have we ever had a candidate for president of the United States that within 60 days had 2 assassination attempts against him? And the media go on and they say, we're not responsible. Our effort to dehumanize Trump, what's the big deal? He's Hitler. He's going to destroy our democracy. And they just keep at it and keep at it and keep at it. Do the rest of the media outside of this program and Conservative Talk Radio and Fox and a few other bastions of liberty and Americanism, do they give a damn if this man's assassinated or not? Let us look deeply into our heart and soul and use our noggins. Do they seem to give a damn, ladies and gentlemen? Over at The View, over at MSNBC and CNN, they just pick right up where they left off. And so do their surrogates. And so do the never-Trumpers in the Republican Party. So do all these people. They just pick right up where they left off. I even saw a preposterously stupid, imbecilic piece. After 2 paragraphs, I couldn't read it anymore, by Mona Charen. Remember her? A distant name. Writing at some freakazoid site that if you're Jewish, you should not vote for Donald Trump. What an idiot. What a fool. What do you think Netanyahu thinks? What do you think the people of Israel think? They happen to love Trump. And even though Harris surrounds herself with Islamists, with self-hating Jews, with anti-Israel propagandists, every single damn one of them, even though she's the most radical anti-Israel candidate in American history, just as she's the most radical anti-American candidate in American history. No, don't vote for Donald Trump. There is clearly a psychological sickness among the Democrats who've talked this way, among the never-Trumpers, among the press. It is sick. When we come back, there's a bipartisan Senate report. I want to go through some of the bullets with you, and you're not going to believe this. The Secret Service of the United States. No, not every Secret Service agent. Many of them are so brave. Many of them agree with us, but many of them are Trump supporters. No, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about this. You're not going to believe it. But don't worry. No. It's just Keystone Cops time. It's a second time. Oh, the guy was hanging out for 12 hours in the bushes and with his long rifle pointing out. Oh, yeah. Oh, we didn't have the manpower to walk around the golf course, for God's sakes. You got 80-year-old men and women walking around the golf course. Maybe we should deputize them to take a look every now and then.
Mark Levin. We're giving you nothing but the best of Mark Levin.
Before we get into news and so forth, this hurricane is a massive disaster. Now, I'm no hurricane expert or historian, and I don't pretend to play one. We do have a home on the east coast of Florida that will be fine. But there's going to be a lot of homes in a lot of parts of this country that are not going to be fine. This is going to be a Category 4 hurricane. That means minimum sustained winds of 130 to 150 miles an hour. That will take down most houses. There can be anywhere from 20, 25, even worse, foot-high sustained waves. Now, in the coastal areas, of course, you don't have mountains and so forth along the coast. So that's going to be devastating. And as I understand it, most people who don't take precautions, who don't get out of the way, who don't evacuate, this is how most of them wind up dying. Because there's nowhere to go and there's nobody to help you. So I always take these warnings seriously. People will say, 2 years ago, that's fine. That's fine. That's luck. That's okay. But this forecast is real, it's serious, and this hurricane is already bearing down in the Gulf, in Florida. This hurricane is 400 to 500 miles wide. It's not moving up the East Coast. It's going to be moving through these states, these southeastern states, into the north. But it's also going to take a bit of a turn to the west, which means places like Nashville and Huntsville are going to see 40, 45, 50 mile an hour sustained winds. So people who aren't used to this, parts of Georgia that aren't used to this, Atlanta, big metropolitan areas as well as rural areas, they're all going to be affected. They're all going to be affected. So what I can tell you now is this program is airing at 6 or 9 p.m. Eastern Time, live. You don't have any time. If you're within the zone, and within the zone I mean within the zone. I don't mean on the outskirts of the zone. If you are at point zero, you better listen to your governors. They're monitoring this. They're getting the best scientific information they can find, and they are relaying it to you. And do it. And do it, because nothing is more important than saving your lives. And this is a big damn hurricane. The other thing that comes out of hurricanes are tornadoes. There's no way to prepare for a tornado. But they're devastating. They're a disaster. But I can tell you, sustained winds of 130 to 150 miles an hour, that is an everlasting, really, tornado. So that's how bad this is. So I just want to point that out. I want people to know that we are thinking about them. We are praying for them. This has to be a horrendous experience. Some people have been through it before, unfortunately. Some people never before. Some people who've moved into these areas in the last year or two are not used to it. Some of you folks who live in these other areas where you're going to get hit, even if you don't get a direct hit, you won't be used to it. Just use your noggin. Use your survival skills. And even if you're in an area where you don't have to evacuate, bring all the stuff that flies around inside and stick it in the garage and so forth. But whatever you do, and I could just tell you from my own experience, we find the spot in the house that is the least vulnerable. Away from any windows, away from any exterior doors, where there's more foundational material, whether it's cinder blocks or whether it's poured cement or whatever it is. And I can tell you in our house in Virginia exactly where that is. And our house in Florida is built like a pillbox. I've had people say to me, so why don't you hang out there during a hurricane, a 2-3, I get the hell out of there. I'm not looking to survive a hurricane. I want the house to survive a hurricane. But we're still flesh and blood. So you don't need any lectures from me. Just do it smart. Because once this thing really bears down, you're going to have no choice. And God knows. God knows what will happen. Only He knows. There's a lot going on, ladies and gentlemen. In New York, the mayor has been indicted. I read this indictment. It's almost 60 pages long. I'm very perplexed by this indictment. You've probably heard others talk about this too. I try not to listen to others. I try and make my own conclusions. A lot of these charges are just ridiculous. Several of them passed the statute of limitations that involved this mayor before he was mayor. Go all the way back to 2017. An upgrade in a flight. Bribery where there's no quid pro quo. So to me, I call that immediately piling on. I don't trust federal prosecutors anymore. I just don't, given what Trump's been through. Now, there's other more substantive charges in this indictment involving foreign monies and so forth, but even where they point that out, they don't point it out in a way where it's a slam dunk. And again, they seem to balloon the numbers to millions and millions of dollars. I don't see that demonstrated in this indictment. And so we shall see. It could be that Eric Adams is the biggest crook. It could be that he's not. It could be that maybe he is a little, maybe he is kinda. I don't know. I just don't know. Now, I don't think Biden's behind it, but it would not surprise me if the leadership of the Department of Justice is behind it. Why, Mark? It's the most radical Marxist leadership in the Department of Justice in American history. Every one of those assistant attorneys general slots, and I am familiar with every damn one of them, is filled with the most radical extremists imaginable. And when AOC is immediately demanding that this mayor resign so he can be replaced with one of her acolytes, another Marxist radical kook. Well, are Marxist radical kooks that are filling the senior levels of the Department of Injustice. Again, I don't need to speculate. Time will tell how this works out. But that's my first take. I draw no conclusions. But I must say, when I watched this press conference by this U.S. attorney, and he was laying it out, and then when I read the bill of particulars, I said, well, this doesn't really mesh. And so I just don't trust these people. And I'm not a big fan of Eric Adams. He didn't mean anything to me. Nothing. So we'll see. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot going on. I noticed today that a lot of time was spent by Biden and Harris with Zelensky. Now, unlike some conservatives, I don't dislike Zelensky. I think he made a real boneheaded mistake this week going to Pennsylvania, kissing ass to the Democrat Party, because I think he feels that this is the only place where he'll get support. It's not true. He can get support, but it doesn't mean he'll get the kind of money without limitation that he's getting now. But it does mean that he'll get a president in Donald Trump who will do what he can to try and end the violence that's taking place. That should be a good thing. And we know Trump by now. We have 4 years of experience with Trump. He doesn't suffer fools. He doesn't roll over. He's not an isolationist. He's not pro-Russia any more than he's pro-Iran or pro-communist China or pro-North Korea. They said he wanted to eliminate NATO. As he explained today during his presser, he wanted to eliminate NATO. He told these NATO countries, if you don't cough up the amount of money that you've agreed to under our North Atlantic Organization, a treaty organization, treaty, well, we're not going to defend you if you won't defend yourselves. And he made them nervous, and they coughed up the money, and NATO had never been more flush with money to defend itself before. He's a negotiator. He knows how to negotiate. The ruling class in Washington are suckers. They don't care how much they bleed the American taxpayer. But ironically, if you listen to them, he hates NATO. Yet when he left office, NATO was stronger than ever. Had more money from most of these countries than ever before. Our military hadn't been as strong as since the Reagan days. And so he's not an isolationist. He's not a pacifist. He's not one of those clowns. He is a peace through strength Reaganite. In fact, his foreign policy, I've said this before, it's no surprise, is very similar to Reagan's foreign policy. He took out Soleimani. Reagan took out their oil bases. And we could go on and on. But something today I noticed, and I was taking notes as I was watching this, really underscored for me that the Biden administration, and I want people to listen to this. I want people to listen to this. We've been censured in New York by George Soros's radio station, WPHT, in Philadelphia, I'm sorry. Now we're on WABC. WPHT in Philadelphia. So the folks there are now moving in significant numbers to the podcast. And I and Westwood One, and we're working together as a team. We will find and create other platforms in these major cities if we need to, and we do. But that's not the point. The point is, this is the Soros strategy. 1 month before the election. Because I want to communicate to the whole country, but particularly American Jews, that you have been suckers to the Democrat Party. You've been suckers to Biden and Harris. You've been suckers to the New York Times that covered up the Holocaust, and Thomas Friedman that undermines the state of Israel. You've been suckers to oligarchs, some of whom are Jewish, some of whom are not. The Democrat Party does not support Israel. And there's new polling out that was provided to me by David Milstein and Josh Hammer. Separate occasions. That shows that so many in the Democratic Party support, quote unquote, the Palestinians against Israel. The numbers are frightening. Overwhelmingly, the Republicans and the Republican Party supports Israel over the so-called Palestinians. There is simply no question about this anymore. Hamas front groups like CARE, their home is in the Democrat Party. Tlaib, Omar, AOC, all the active, outspoken Islamists, Marxists, River to the Sea crowd, they're all Democrats. Now, you might say, well, we see some on the right in the media, and that's true. But when you look at organized, systemic, party-affiliated anti-Semites, their big home now is in the Democrat Party. Look, all the parties have real sickos, don't get me wrong. But that's where the activists are. And they have an enormous effect. And they're in the executive branch of this administration. They're in the executive branch of this administration. And most of them are in the vice president's office, in the vice president's circle. Most of them are retreads from Obama. And they're there, and they are poised, and they're ready to attack. And what they're doing right now, so you understand, is they're withholding intelligence information from Israel. Right now, about Hezbollah. I pointed this out last night. They're withholding basic military equipment right now to try and starve Israel. And so here's what I wrote, and I think it's important. It was posted by our friends at Right Scoop. America's anti-Israel Harris-Biden regime, more overwhelming proof. Now, please listen carefully. The whole country, but especially Jews who've been brought up as Democrats, who've spent their entire life voting as Democrats, and think that Kamala Harris is with them. Biden-Harris loves Zelensky. Did you see that today? And treat him with respect, but hate Netanyahu and treat him with contempt. They condemn Putin, but subsidize Iran. They rush arms to Ukraine, but withhold arms from Israel. They provide intelligence to Ukraine, but are not sharing intelligence with Israel. They seek no ceasefire or diplomatic solution with Ukraine, but demand that Israel agree to a ceasefire and insist on a diplomatic resolution. They say Russia must be stopped or that war will expand. They say Israel must be stopped or that war will expand. I'm going to finish this, Mr. Producer. They put sanctions on Russia, but lifted them on Iran. They've flowed more money into Iran than they have into Israel. I say this as someone who supports Ukraine, but the Harris-Biden regime's conflicting statements and actions underscores their animus. The Democrat regime's animus has towards the Jewish state. It is beyond debate, and it is factually conclusive. You better wake up to this, America, particularly Jewish Democrats.